Christmas Eve, 2024. Right on the dawn of Christmas this past year, a mysterious pair of deaths have appeared within the Bigfoot community. Two men determined to head out on Christmas Eve into the remote forest of Washington state to hunt for the elusive beast, only to not arrive home the following morning. And in 2018, a mysterious object is seen and recorded on camera hovering over a U.S. Joint Operations Base in Iraq. This strange jellyfish UAP has been nicknamed the Spaghetti Monster and seems to defy conventional belief. Today on Unblurring the Unknown, a duo of topics, both with mysteries to be unraveled and possible cover-ups to be exposed. This is Dead Bigfoot Hunters and the Spaghetti Monster UFO. Welcome back to Unblurring the Unknown, as always. I am your host, Dominic, and on today's episode, I have not one, but two different topics to discuss with you. And anyone who has been with me since the very beginning knows that this is, in fact, a little bit of an anomaly, all things considered. I don't do this very often. In fact, I think I've only done it one other time, with the exception of today's episode. Now, the reason for this is because I have found myself stumbling upon all these juicy little small topics that aren't worthy of a full episode, but I still think the stories about them deserve to be told and discussed on the show. Now, I found the two topics for today's episode while scrolling throughout the internet and TikTok like I normally do, and feel like these two would be a good duo of topics to explore for this week's episode. And they are kind of different from each other, or very different, one kind of being a cryptid murder-esque story, and then one being a UFO, UAP type story. So I feel like they are very different from each other, and it'll keep you kind of engaged and tuned in to the episode this week. Now, the two topics I want to give you and that we will dive into for today's episode are both relatively recent, which obviously adds to my interest of covering them, that they are recent stories that have been in the news, been in the headlines, as recent as last Christmas, obviously, with the case of the two Bigfoot hunters coming up dead, and then in January of 2024, so recent but not as recent, the story of this jellyfish, spaghetti monster UFO story came out. So, like I said, both very, very recent, and obviously I wanted to cover them both for this week's episode. But with all that being said, let's first tune in to the first topic I want to present with you today, and let's go with the most recent of the two topics and take a short trip back in time to Christmas of this past year. On December 24th, two men aged 59 and 37, their names have not been released, would leave their homes in Portland, Oregon to head towards the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. Now, if I did pronounce that first part of the name wrong, I do apologize. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced that. It's spelt like that, so I'm going to take a shot in the dark and say that it's pronounced like that. They would head towards the Gifford Pinchot National Forest in neighboring Washington state. Now, this trip to the Gifford Pinchot National Forest is not a short one. It is over 100 miles from Portland and is an approximate 2 hour and 40 to 45-ish minute drive. The reasoning for the two men leaving on Christmas Eve was to go on an expedition to find Bigfoot, supposedly. Their families knew of this plan and knew that the two men were going to return late that night from what I could find in my research. However, the men would not make it home that night, and around 1 a.m. on Christmas Day, their families in Portland would contact the Skamania County Sheriff's Office and report the two men missing. This would, of course, start a massive manhunt to try and locate the two men. Skamania County Sheriff's Office, a plethora of volunteers, search dogs, drones, and helicopters, and even the Coast Guard were tasked with the job of trying to locate the two men, and after a 3-day search, their bodies were discovered in a very secluded area of the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. Skamania County Sheriff's Department would release a statement about the search that would include the following, and I quote, "Reaching them and bringing them out to help give family members closure required extraordinary physical strength, ingenuity, and perseverance from every rescuer involved." They continued with, "Creeks had to be crossed, obstacles climbed, and frozen ground navigated, all while maintaining the safety and well-being of the entire team." The Skamania County Sheriff's Office came to the conclusion that the two men had died of exposure to the elements and that they were not prepared for the type of weather they would encounter that day. Even though the winter months in the Cascade Mountain range of Washington could be considered more mild compared to other parts of the United States, it is still extremely dangerous. During the time leading up to the men's trek into the wilderness, the weather was kind of a mixed bag between wet snow, freezing rain, and below freezing temperatures. There were also many areas of the forest that had suffered from minor flooding, and the searchers had to cross many streams and brooks that had been overtaken with floodwaters from this kind of chaotic weather in the prior days. Now, it was clear from my understanding that the men did not adequately prepare themselves for the weather they were going to face that day, but perhaps, maybe it opens up the conspiracy side of things a little bit. Now, what do I mean by this? Again, this is my own spin on things, and I am certainly not sold on this idea or this theory that I am going to pitch to you. And again, this is my own personal opinion. And maybe not personal opinion. It's just theory, hypothesis, a guess. Maybe just to get your minds working a little bit. Because again, it does seem like these men did not adequately prepare themselves. But before I give my whole thoughts on this entire kind of story, I want to plant this conspiracy bug in your brain really quick. And again, like I said, I'm not sold on this idea. I am merely stating it because, again, crazier things have happened before, and we have seen the government, or the police for that matter, do crazier things. But hear me out here. What if the men didn't actually die of exposure, but instead actually succumbed to a Bigfoot attack? Now, again, I am not saying this, as I've stated before, because I don't want anybody to take this literally, or I guess the full nature of everything hasn't even been released. I mean, their names have not been released, or from what I could find. This is a very tragic incident, because two people ended up dying. But again, it is my job as a content creator to theorize on these things, especially, I mean, my whole podcast is Unblurring the Unknown, and the unknown here is, what if they didn't actually die to the elements? You know, maybe what if there was a cover-up here? And again, this is all to get your minds turning to these ideas and theories, because again, like I stated, crazier things have happened before. Now, for this theory to have any footing, it would include all of the Skamania County Sheriff's Office and the volunteers and the Coast Guard to be sworn to secrecy about what actually happened, which, on the surface, is extremely far-fetched. But maybe, perhaps, when the bodies were discovered, they were discovered by just one group of searchers. They clearly saw that maybe the two men's deaths were not an accident and covered it up from there. Now, as if it came out that two men were mauled to death by Bigfoot, this area of the country that relies a lot on Bigfoot-oriented tourism and marketing would suffer greatly. Now, do I think that this is what happened? Absolutely not. But is it fun to speculate and think about? Absolutely. Because on the surface, you do think about it, the Pacific Northwest is known for Bigfoot. You know, Bigfoot is kind of a mainstream culture figure, if you want to go that far, and is possibly one of the most famous cryptids of all time. You know, and this area of the country and the Pacific Northwest as a whole has a giant influence and history of Bigfoot and Sasquatch. Now, even though we haven't covered a specific Bigfoot episode on this show, Bigfoot's impact and appearance has been mentioned numerous times. Again, perhaps the only cryptid that stands on the same level of Bigfoot in terms of being this kind of pop culture figure and its impact on society would probably be the Loch Ness Monster and maybe Mothman, if you want to go that far. What kind of adds to the lore of this story is that Bigfoot/Sasquatch is protected in Skamania County, and they actually have a law in place that prohibits any harm to a Sasquatch, and that if found guilty of harm to a Sasquatch, you could face a $1,000 fine or a year in prison, or maybe even both. And to be honest, that might seem a little bit extreme, but this, of course, is an area of the country that seems to take these things and the overall existence of Bigfoot very, very seriously. Now, with this entire story, you might be asking, has there been any official death actually linked to Bigfoot? Now, again, this might be taking a little bit of a side note, but it kind of plays into our kind of conspiracy, you know, that we're talking about here. And when you start talking about official deaths that have been linked to Bigfoot or attributed to Bigfoot, that is where things get weird and fishy, because, of course, in the eyes of the news media, the mainstream media, Bigfoot is a mythical creature that does not exist. So for you to find this information, you have to dig a little deeper, and that is what I tried to do. From the research I was able to find, it seems like there is always a rumor or urban legend about Sasquatch attacks, but of course no evidence to support these. In one story I found that was originally shared by Bigfoot researcher Tim Coonbo Baker on an internet radio show, Baker shared a story that occurred in the 1980s at some point in which a hunter and guide in either Arizona or New Mexico, that part was kind of vague from what I could find, encountered a Bigfoot while out on a hunting expedition. The hunter shot at the creature, but it did not kill it, but instead rather angered it. The Bigfoot attacked the hunter and actually decapitated him, while the guide dropped his rifle and fled for his life. When the guide reported the incident to the police and the authorities, when they arrived, they deduced the attack was nothing more of just being a bear attack. And even though this guide was pleading with the police and saying that this in fact was Bigfoot, he was responsible, he or she was responsible, they didn't believe him, and they chalked this entire incident up to a bear attack, and they just thought that he was off his rocker. Now, there are a few more stories that exist out there about Bigfoot killings, and one includes a few campers in Canada being attacked and one of them being killed, as well as another story about an elderly couple having their home broken into by a Bigfoot and being attacked, and the elderly man being killed in the break-in by the Sasquatch when they tried to get it out of the house. Now, the only problem with all of these stories is that they are just that, stories. Unfortunately, it always goes back to evidence, and I couldn't find anything backing these stories up besides their mentioning on an internet forum. Now, I'm not trying to say that these stories didn't happen, because of course my job is to dive into these stories and say, okay, did they happen? What is the unknown here? What are the unanswered questions? But if in fact these attacks did happen, I would be hard-pressed for them to be existing out in the open internet for us to all look into. In the case of the two men found dead this past Christmas, I do think that it was a case of being purely an accident. They were probably not prepared for the elements whatsoever or the type of weather that they would experience when they went into the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, and unfortunately, that is just how they passed. Living in northern New England, myself living in northern New England, we see cases like this one, just not involving the Bigfoot part, pretty much on the yearly basis of hikers venturing up into the mountains to hike or camp or anything like that. And some of them are extremely veteran hikers. They're extremely experienced. They've been doing this years upon years, if not decades. And all it takes is for there to be a freak weather change or a storm system to move in that they didn't expect, and unfortunate things could happen and do happen. Now, I don't think that there is any possible cover-up here with the two dead Bigfoot hunters. However, it is fun to speculate and think of other possible motives or theories, or whether or not there is a cover-up. Again, I felt like this story was kind of a different one that I felt like is not worthy of its own episode, but in conjunction with something else that I'm going to go into here in just a few seconds, is kind of a neat little story I wanted to share with you all. But with that all being said, let's move into the second story I want to cover for today's episode, and that being a jellyfish UAP that was sighted over a U.S. Joint Operations Base in Iraq in 2018, and the footage that was shot of it. Now, back in January of last year, investigative journalist and UFO researcher Jeremy Corbell would post a video that would show this jellyfish-like object moving while it was being tracked by forward-looking infrared radar, aka FLIR. Now, I do encourage everyone to go out and watch this video, and, if you just look up Spaghetti Monster UFO or Jellyfish UFO, Iraq 2018, it's going to pop right up. I encourage everybody to go out and watch it, because it is one of the strangest videos I think I've ever watched, if I am being completely honest. The video in question shows an object kind of flying or hovering through the frame as the camera follows it. The object is dark in color and often shifts between gray and black as it gets followed around by the camera. Now, of course, this footage is shot through the infrared camera, meaning everything is in black, white, and gray. The camera follows this object through the video, and it is moving at a pretty consistent rate of speed, and the object stays pretty uniform in shape. And to be honest, it does look like a mass of tentacles, and I can see the jellyfish relation. Now, in the video, the original video that I watched, which was posted by News Nation in response to Jeremy Corbell posting the video, that video in particular goes on for 2 minutes. But according to Corbell and others who were there on the ground or watching the videotape or behind the videotape, watching this strange object floating over the base, said the full video and full timeline of this encounter lasted approximately a few minutes before this object submerged into a nearby body of water. Once it submerged, it stayed submerged for 17 minutes before reappearing from that body of water and then taking off from the Joint Operations Base at a very high rate of speed. Now, to add to this mystery, a Marine stationed at the base during this time the video was shot has come forward and stated that this was a type of kind of ghost story or urban legend of the base. Now, although the UFO UAP looks very much like a jellyfish, this Marine, named Michael Sinkowski, and I hope I pronounced that right, stated that he and the other soldiers stationed there called it the Spaghetti Monster. Now, Sinkowski, when sitting down with News Nation for an interview, disputes the initial reporting of the object being seen dropping down into this body of water near the base, and then rapidly re-emerging and taking off. Sinkowski also stated that the original video was actually shot in 2017 and not 2018. And when Sinkowski arrived at the base in 2018, he was actually shown this video. And a majority of the soldiers at the base didn't know what they were looking at, and they didn't have any conventional explanations as to what this object was. Sinkowski added that the footage was taken from something called an aerostat, which is a giant balloon-like blimp object with cameras on it to scan for possible threats to the base. Sinkowski stated in this News Nation interview, and I quote, "Toward the end, it seemingly continued off in the distance." He continued with, "It got smaller and smaller. It got seemingly far enough away where they could not see it anymore. Whether it dropped into the water or it just continued over the lake, because there is a lake next to the base we were at. At no point in the video can you see it drop into the lake or shoot into the sky like have been some claims. That never happened. It crossed my mind because the theories we had didn't fully explain it. Our curiosity kind of goes there. Is this something extraterrestrial, or paranormal, or whatever you want to call it?" Now, Sinkowski continues with, "It wasn't like we needed to take immediate action. I think it was handled the best way possible, and ended up being the ghost story of the base." Now, News Nation would go on to reach out to the Pentagon for comment about this spaghetti monster UFO, and they actually did get a reply back from the Pentagon. Sue Go, a spokesperson for the Pentagon, said, and I quote, in regards to the Department of Defense's comments on the footage, and I quote, "Do not comment on the authenticity of alleged DOT material that may have been leaked." Sue Go continued the statement with the following: "DOD takes public interest in unidentified anomalous phenomena seriously and is committed to openness and accountability to the American people. This commitment must be balanced with the department's obligation to protect sensitive information, sources, and methods." Now, in my opinion, this can be one of two things. A, very compelling because the government is not denying what was captured on footage, and B, it is very clearly a fake and the government does not feel the need to address said UAP sighting or any UAP sightings that are clearly fabricated or have no physical evidence to back them up. And no matter which kind of the side of the aisle you want to fall on this, I could see this going either way. However, to add to the side of the aisle that believes that this could be fact and a genuine UAP or UFO encounter, a physics professor named Dr. Matthew Zygadis, and I really hope I pronounced that right. If I did not, I do apologize. He does not believe that this could be something conventional, like a smudge on the camera lens, like many people think it is. He points to the fact the UAP in the video seems to change its heat signature over the course of the video footage. He points out that the object in question changes its heat signature very rapidly, and he personally can't name something that would be able to do that, as no known object is able to change their heat signature that rapidly. He also points out that if the object were in fact a camera smudge or camera defect that it was picking up in the reticle, the 4 slashes that are actually visible from the FLIR camera, they kind of move around in relation to the object. They don't stay completely still, which leads Dr. Zygotis to think that whatever is in the camera is actually there. What it is the other question. Dr. Zygotis would make these comments to News Nation and say the following in a quote: "My initial feeling was smudge on the lens. That doesn't seem to be borne out when looking at the entire video, but nevertheless, there's not enough context to make a conclusion, so by definition, it's unknown. That doesn't mean it is something unnatural or remarkable, but right now there isn't enough data or more of the backstory and context." Again, this clearly has not stopped from the entirety of Reddit threads that I had looked through about this topic, claiming that this was bird shit on the camera lens. And I can see where they are coming from, but the bird shit theory I just find hard to believe. Now, going back to the person who originally had posted this video, Jeremy Corbell. He has been pretty much a mainstay figure within the UFO communities and has advocated for more government transparency on the UFO UAP phenomenon, but he is also a documentary filmmaker and has wrote numerous books on UFOs. Now, I have said before on this show, and I've said it numerous times, and I like to stand behind this opinion of mine. When it comes to people having encounters with UFOs who instantly go down the route of book deals or movie deals, I think that partially discredits their story, because now you could say that there was some type of financial motivation behind making some story up. But Corbell, in this instance, did not have this encounter. He was merely sharing it. So it begs the question of who leaked the video to him, or who leaked it in the first place. And then who, if it was leaked, or if it was shared to Corbell, who shared it to him? If it was just leaked and Corbell picked it up, where did he find the leak? There's a couple other questions there that we would kind of need to figure out, but are complete unknowns because we just don't know. Normally, if there was additional sources coming forward, I would probably say that this sighting was made up. Or if there wasn't any additional sources coming forward, I mean. But we do have Michael Sinkowski coming out and saying that he did see this footage, and he actually even critiqued the initial story from Corbell as well, making me feel like Sinkowski actually saw this footage when he was stationed at this joint operations base. He actually heard from soldiers who had seen this. They had no idea what it was, and I think Sinkowski is telling a genuine story because, again, like I mentioned, he goes back and actually debates Corbell's initial reporting, which if this was fake, or if Sinkowski was, maybe buddy-buddy with Corbell, he would probably say, yep, nope, totally accurate. Everything Corbell is stating is factual. This happened, XYZ. Sinkowski's not saying that. He kind of disputes this idea that, it went into this lake, it came out of the lake, it shot up into the air, away from the base. He's saying we have no proof to say that it went in the lake. We have no proof to say that it went at extreme speeds away from the base. We just lose sight of it, pretty much. It gets smaller off in the distance, and we can't see it anymore. So to me, that is kind of making me believe that this sighting is credible. Even though, if you watch the footage, it's kind of still very hard to believe because you don't know what this is. It does not look like anything that you would normally think of in the sky, and that part makes it very, very strange. Now, with that being said, let's kind of move into kind of a theory section, but this is kind of my personal opinion as well. Now, this first theory, and I don't think that this object is fake. Let me come out and say it. I think this is a genuine object. I mean, if you want to go down the route of where this is fake, or maybe this is still a smudge on the lens, or maybe this is like Reddit says, this is bird shit on the lens. If you want to go down that route, I totally understand, especially if you watch the video, and like I said, it is kind of hard to believe. But I think that this UAP is real. And to be honest, I think it's hard to say that it is real, but as much as I would like to think that, honestly, that this, instead of being a UFO or UAP or whatever you want to call it, that maybe instead of this being a UAP, this is actually a highly advanced drone created by either another country or the United States, and that this drone possibly is an information gathering technology or has that technology on board it, and they needed an area to conduct surveillance that would be away from the eyes of the public. So, of course, that would basically make it that this is the United States, that this is a drone that the United States has developed, that this is a test, that this is a classified aerial drone or whatever you have it that the United States has been developing, and they needed a place to test it that would be away from the eyes of the public, that they could do it in the dark of night, that they would be able to pretty much keep the American public from being curious. Now, maybe they would conduct this test in Iraq and knew that, yeah, sure, the soldiers will talk about it, but they did not anticipate the footage to leak. Now, there are crazy stories that come from wartime environments and conflict environments all the time. And perhaps if this was the case, or if the footage did leak, they expected it to be one of those, like a ghost story or an urban legend. They didn't expect it to be something that would gain so much steam, but instead the footage gets leaked. Jeremy Corbell gets it, or perhaps somebody else gets it on the internet and then sends it to Corbell, and it's just kind of going round and round in the internet now. Now, of course, Corbell would dig this footage, as it fits everything a UFO researcher would be into, this being possibly classified footage of a UAP and everything else that comes along with that. Now, the Pentagon would also now get wind of this and decides that perhaps it is within their best interest to just say, hey, we have no comment, or hey, we don't know, just to maintain secrecy. They don't want to give away too much, and they wouldn't want it to be labeled as a UAP, because then, even though the UAP topic has gained in popularity, they're still not transparent with all this stuff. They have came out and said, oh yeah, we had programs that looked into this stuff, but that's pretty much it. They have not come out and said, hey, UAPs are real, there is this, they have never said that. And even though we know so much more about UAPs and UFOs and the phenomenon in general now than we ever have, the government is still holding a lot back from us. So if this in fact was a drone that was developed by the United States military, they certainly would not tell us that this is an advanced drone developed by the United States military, but we know also that they probably wouldn't tell us that this is a UAP, and they wouldn't want it to be labeled as a UAP. Now, in this case, if it was a drone developed by the United States government, they would not want other superpowers or enemies of the United States to know that we have a drone of this capacity that is able to look like this and conduct high levels of surveillance. Now, this is just my personal opinion. Everybody's entitled to their own opinions in terms of what you think that this object is. But again, that is my personal opinion. I think that this is a drone developed by the United States to conduct high-level intelligence gathering, and they tested it over the Joint Operations Base in Iraq because they did not want other superpowers. They did not want the United States public seeing this object and, of course, freaking out. Now, again, if you want to believe that this is a UAP, completely understand, completely justifiable. I can see why you think that completely. Now, if you think this is bird shit on the lens, you are also completely entitled to that opinion. However, when I looked at the footage personally, it looked like the object was moving. It did not look like it was just a smudge on the lens, and I feel like if... I don't take this the wrong way, anybody who's enlisted in the United States military, I don't think the United States military is that stupid. Sure, we see instances of, mistakes, accidents where things happen, and, maybe it's not the brightest thing to do, from a military perspective or from a soldier. But if this, in fact, was bird shit on the lens of a camera, you would think that Jeremy Corbell, who is obviously an experienced UFO researcher, would be able to figure that out upon looking at the video. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I need to do more research on Jeremy Corbell before I make the analysis that maybe he's not doing this for clicks, or maybe he is doing this for clicks. I don't know. I am just speculating. Whichever side of the aisle you fall on, you are completely entitled to that. That is the beauty of this, is that I'm not going to force you to believe a certain opinion or believe something that you don't want to believe. I'm going to lay out all the facts there for you and just tell you my personal opinion on everything. And personally, I think that this is a drone developed by the United States military and that it is super duper classified and they don't want anybody finding out about it. But they certainly can't deny its existence either because it's clearly on camera. But with that being said, I wanted to share these two topics with you today. Again, two little fun ones. and then obviously get back into the swing of things with full-length topics hopefully very soon. And this checks 2 little boxes on my ever-growing list in my episode queue. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me on this week's episode of Unblurring the Unknown. But before I go, I normally roll it out with a whole kind of mandatory plugs where I go over all my socials, and I'll still do that here. But I want to make a statement here. As much as I am into the conspiracy realm and the realm of all things that may be strange and unsolved and everything like that, I want to take a brief minute to talk about the plane crash and Black Hawk helicopter crash that occurred in Washington, D.C. just the other day. Now, when this occurred, I saw a lot of people within the conspiracy, circles going online and making some very kind of outrageous claims. And I saw 2 sides of the political spectrum duking it out, blaming each other for something that is no more than an accident. And if you look at this situation, and I almost took to my personal TikTok to discuss my grievances on this, but I decided not to, and I felt like I didn't want to get in the middle of it because all that does is just cause more infighting, and that's not the point. So I'd rather take to here and express my sympathies and state my opinion and nip this in the butt before maybe somebody suggests me to do this as a topic. This was a very tragic event. This was a tragic accident. I don't think that there is any specific party to blame. And to be honest, we don't have the answers to those questions right now. At the end of the day, 67 people lost their lives. And the fact that people are online pointing the finger, saying it is this, saying it is that, saying it is the Democrats, saying that it's the Republicans, is extremely narrow-minded. It's idiotic. And it's honestly completely foolish. And you know me, I've said it before on this show, that I do not pick sides when it comes to politics. I show you the facts. And if the facts point to something being wrong, I tell it to you. This is something in which, again, like I said, you saw both sides of the aisle, pointing fingers at each other and blaming each other. When in the reality, again, like I said, this is a very tragic accident. And so many people lost their lives. Innocent people, good people, that obviously did not anticipate their lives to end this way, and my thoughts and condolences go out with everybody affected from this tragedy. Again, I wanted to nip this in the butt now before somebody recommends it as a topic, because we do not have all the questions. We do not have, all the answers. It's going to take months for the NTSB to conduct their full investigation into this, and I just want to say I am not going to cover this as a topic, only because I feel like in a day and age where we are so divided, this topic has become instantly politicized, and that is something I do not want to be a part of. So for that being said, again, my thoughts and condolences go to all the victims of that plane crash. I hope that they are able to find some sort of closure. And again, this is just a tragic, unfortunate accident, and it is very, very sad. And it is just something that, again, I've been thinking about it quite frequently because of somebody who covers this type of stuff, conspiracies. I've talked about a couple plane accidents before on the show. It's very, very unfortunate. And I just wanted to vent this all out there and put this all out there for you all to know. And to kind of give you a PSA that I will not cover that as a topic if somebody recommends it to me. But with all that being said, I hate to end the podcast on kind of a sad note, so let me go and do my obligatory plugs like I always do. If you were listening to this on Spotify and YouTube, please turn on post notifications so you get notified every time I post a new episode. If you were on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe. It helps me out so much, and I greatly appreciate it. You can also go ahead and follow me on Instagram at Unblurring the Unknown on Instagram. That's also where you can email me, unblurringtheunknown@gmail.com. Send me your topic suggestions. You can send them to that email. You can also send them to me via Instagram direct message. Get those topic suggestions out to me. I am really good about it. I actually got a topic suggestion the other day that I plan on covering soon because it is a juicy one, and I kind of like where he was going. This individual who sent me the topic suggestion, he kind of gave me his theory behind everything with this, and I kind of dig it. So I'm going to definitely look into that one very soon, but this is a test that, of course, I do your topic suggestions when you suggest them to me, and I try and do them as soon as possible. I'm as interested in these things as you folks are as interested in these things, and the support, I greatly, greatly appreciate it. Well, that all being said, that is going to do it for me on this week's episode on dead Bigfoot hunters and the spaghetti monster, UFO, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you all on the next one.